my advice to anybody in life, no matter what you're doing, whether you're an entrepreneur or a company person, find a mentor that can help you grow and be a mentor to help others grow when you do have that opportunity, because it's been very fulfilling for me to be mentored by some of the greatest people I'll ever know. And for me to be able to pay that back and mentor students today or younger folks, startups, to share my experiences and hopefully, one shred of wisdom to save them the grief that I've gone through in some areas where, I think that's what a good mentor can be.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Path Found. This is the podcast where we unpack the winding, messy, and meaningful journeys that lead to the work we love and a life that feels right. I'm Monica Argandonian, and each week I'm going to sit down with someone whose path didn't follow a straight line, but it still led them to purpose and fulfillment and often surprising success. These are real conversations about mentorship, pivots, networking, self-doubt, mistakes that we all make, and what it means to find direction when the map runs out. These stories are here to inspire and guide you. We'll dig into the things school didn't teach, like how to navigate career twists, life lessons, and big transitions. If you like what you hear, please share the podcast with a friend, subscribe, and leave us a review. You can also find us on Instagram at PathFound Podcast or online at KeystoneNetwork.org. There you can send in your comments, suggest guests or topics, or even apply to be a guest yourself. This podcast is for you, my students, my peers, and anyone figuring it out as they go. As a longtime teacher and anthropologist, I've always believed in the power of stories. They remind us we're not alone and that it's okay to change your mind, take a different route, or still be unsure of what comes next. This is my pivot too, and so I'm glad to have you on this journey with me. Now let's get started. Welcome back to Path Found. In today's episode, I sit down with Clay Sandidge, whose career journey is anything but ordinary. From sealing driveways in high school and selling his first business before graduation, to building companies, working with giants like Shell, and navigating the ups and downs of leadership, his story is one of mentorship, resilience, and learning through risk. Along the way, he shares hard-earned lessons about trusting your instincts, surrounding yourself with the right people, and passing that wisdom down to the next generation. As I start with everybody, what were you like in high school?
I grew up in Kentucky and going to high school in Kentucky in the late 70s, early 80s was very interesting. I had a good group of friends that I ran with, and we started the kind of first gang, if you will, not a negative connotation in the term of gang, but we called ourselves the cronies, and crony is a friend. And there were 10 of us, and we, grew up in different, some of us were affluent, some of us were not. It was a broad mix of people that had varying backgrounds, and it made us all kind of think about what the other was doing at all times and what we wanted to do when we, got out of high school and started our lives.
Are you still friends with them today?
3 of them I'm still very good friends with. Unfortunately, 2 of them have passed away, and the others I have not, I've kind of lost touch with them after college.
So the cronies, you were college-oriented, talking about careers.
About half of us were, and half of us did go to college, and, we talked about careers. We were a pretty wild and crazy bunch. We did things that you probably shouldn't be doing. And, that was a good thing for me because one of my crony friends, his father, pulled me aside and said, look, you're smarter than this. You need to do things differently, and I want to show you how to do them, and kind of recorrected my path in high school, which I was going down the wrong path, and ultimately I got steered in the right direction, and he was probably my first mentor.
Wow. And so you cleaned up a little bit, cleaned up your act. And then did you always know you were going to go to school then? Did you know what you wanted to do?
I was the youngest of 6, 5 siblings. All of my siblings were educated, went to college. The next oldest was 3 years older than me. So everybody went to college in my family, and I came from 5 generations of lawyers. And, there was some expectations. And being the youngest, I didn't follow any of the rules. So I got derailed and went down the wrong path. And fortunately, my freshman year in high school, I got corrected through my best friend's dad. And he came to both my friend Frank and I and said, hey, you guys need to straighten up your act. I want to put you to work. He had a very long driveway. And he said, I need my driveway to be sealed. And we're like, what does that mean? He's like, it needs to be asphalt sealed so it'll prolong the life of my driveway. And it was like a mile-long driveway. So we're like, yeah, we could use some money. We would like to do that. And hence, he was my very first mentor. And he got got us set up in a business where he helped us buy all the materials. We used, Chevron Jet Seal. We used the best products you could get. And at the end of the day, it was about a 2-week project that got us going. And at the end of that 2 weeks, he gave us a check, and it was a lot of money. He paid us more than the minimum wage back then was like, I don't know, $1.85 or $2 an hour. And he paid us $5 an hour to do this job. And at the end of the day, it was quite a bit of money. So anyway, the story continues, but that was kind of my redirectional moment and an aha moment in high school where I did not want to go down this path of destruction and self-destruction. I knew I needed to get back on the right path. And my parents, they were separating, and it was a tough time for me in my life.
So was it the labor, the work, the fact that you made money?
It was exceptionally hard labor.
Yeah.
It was very hot. You're working in asphalt. It's hot Kentucky summer, humid. It was very laborious. And yes, I wasn't a fan of how hard the work was. But when I got the check at the end of the day or the end of the project, it was a lot of money. And my friend's father said, hey, you can take that money and go out and spend it, do whatever you want with it. Or I can show you guys how to make a lot of money doing this in our community. Henceforth, we started our first company in high school, Anderson and Sandidge Ceiling Company.
That is great. So, all right. So you do that in high school. I assume you make some good money.
We worked for 4 years, all 4 years, worked very hard. We were young entrepreneurs. We knocked on doors. We sold every job ourselves. We had to figure out, the pricing schematic of how to price the project because of some of the asphalt was very porous and it took up a lot more of the sealant than a newer driveway. So there was a lot of learning curve. And at the end of the 4 years of high school, we had a lot of money in our pockets. We ended up selling the company to 2 older guys that my siblings knew. And to this day, they've created probably a multi-million-dollar company out of what we sold to them back in 1981.
So you actually sold your company?
$35,000. We sold our company with all of our contacts, all of our trucks, all of our equipment. And then we both went off to college with big chunks of money in our pocket.
You were seniors in high school.
Seniors in high school.
So now how do you go to college and give all that up?
Well, I got out of the state of Kentucky. I moved to Arizona and went to University of Arizona, and I met a whole lot of new people. And I knew I needed to get out of the state of Kentucky because I needed something bigger in my life than what I felt my small hometown could offer me. And that was a great move for me because it opened my eyes to the world and a lot of different individuals that, grew up in various parts of the country. And I did it. Once again, I had a lot of money in my pocket, and I went down a crazy path again. I didn't get very good grades my first year. Basically, almost failed out. And then I figured out, hey, I got to do something different. And I self-corrected. But it did take me 6 years to get through college. Unfortunately, I paid my own way through college, the entirety. And, I was very proud of the ability to do that because my parents paid for all my siblings to go to college. But when I came around, they had separated. My dad had some financial troubles, and he was unable to assist me to do that. So I basically was able to put myself through college, and, quite an accomplishment.
Yeah. And what did you major in?
I got my degree in geology with a double minor in marine biology and oceanography. And there was a story behind that as well.
So, okay, geology. How did you?
As I was in high school, my dad was an attorney, and he acquired an oil company through a bankruptcy proceeding. And he said, when you go to college, get your degree in business or whatever. And when you graduate, I'll get you started with this company, and perhaps someday it'll be yours. Well, in 1986, the year before I graduated, the price of oil collapsed and that company went away. And, I think in retrospect, things happen for a reason, and they always have throughout my career. So that opportunity did not ever materialize. And henceforth, I moved to the state of California and started, what became the rest of my life.
So when you graduated thinking, okay, this company is going to be here for me, it's not. Now what?
Well, knowing that, I knew how to make money. I knew I had confidence in myself and my abilities. I came out of college. I graduated. I sent resumes to 30 oil companies, name one. They're all the biggest companies. I went off to Europe for 3 months. And when I came back, I had rejection letters from every one of them because nobody was hiring geologists. So I met a guy literally the first couple of weeks weeks, I got back from Europe, and he was a 75-year-old gentleman who created some of the first oil fields in Burma.
Wow.
And he had a line on some opportunities to acquire some leases, some oil field leases in Bakersfield. We did that. We went to the general public and raised about $500,000 and procured 5 leases. And hence, here's the start of my second company right out of college. We called it California Enhanced Oil Production Company, CPAC. I forget the acronym, but I was commuting from Newport Beach to Bakersfield the first 2 years out of college, and it was brutal. And ultimately, we decided that, he was getting too old to do it. I needed a real mentor, which he was an incredible mentor because he knew so much, but it was the agony of going to Bakersfield every week, going up on a Sunday night and coming back on Friday and playing in Newport Beach all weekend and then doing it again. It beat me up pretty bad. So we decided collectively to shut that company down after about a little over 2 years. We got our investors all their money back. We made some money. I put a little bit of money in my pocket, and I realized I needed to get to work for a company to learn and, really grow and understand what, the real working world looked like.
How did you connect with that man? Like, why did he trust you, a recent college grad?
We were in Newport Beach, and I was having lunch at Muldoon's. I'll never forget it. And I'm talking to one of my dear friends and his mother, and I was trying to figure out where I was going to get a job and what I was going to do. And this guy was sitting behind me, and he heard my story. And he came around the booth. And he said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry, but I heard your story. I work for an oil company here in Newport Beach, and I'd like to hire you to help me do these things." And ultimately, he didn't work for a big oil company. He was kind of a one-man show, but he did have some really good ideas. He did have some clients where we could raise the money to do this. He needed a geologist that could really understand the dynamics of looking for oil and producing secondary and tertiary oil recovery, which I didn't really know much about it, but hey, I was willing to learn.
Right. That's incredible. So, all right. So you sell that company, and now what?
This is when kind of the environmental business was coming out of the ground in California and the U.S., and the EPA was started, and, I had all these leaking underground storage tanks, from all the gas stations. And a friend of mine was in this business, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come to work for our company and help us, as a project manager, clean up these gas station sites?" So I did. And after about the first 2 months, I was selling all the work that I was bringing. I would go in and sell a project, then I would do the work. Well, it was clear and obvious I was better at selling the projects than doing the work. So they made me a salesperson. I went out and brought in a tremendous amount of work for this company and helped them grow substantially over it was about a 2-year period. And I realized that I outgrew that company and I want to do something bigger. And at this time, there was an event that occurred. It was one of the major catastrophes in Florida. The hurricane hit down there. And there was an individual that made and I digress here a little bit, but there was an individual that made about $100 million on that cleanup. And he came to California, and he was looking to build a soil recycling facility to remediate all this contaminated soil that was coming out of all these underground storage tanks. And the Alameda Corridor was being built in LA, and there was a tremendous, that was going through from the ports all the way to downtown LA, and there was a tremendous amount of contamination. So he wanted to build a soil recycling facility, and he did. And a friend of mine was the broker that brokered the deal that found him the facility to build the plant, and he recommended me as a guy to come in and help build that company, and I did. And this was American Remedial Technologies. I came in, I helped him start the company. He was the money behind it. I came in and did everything, and we started the company in Linwood, California, in an old Jorgensen steel facility. Built all the equipment. I did everything you could do to get the business up and running other than write the checks. And after about 4 years, we got the facility, fully operational. We were busting at the seams, and, everybody was making money and having a good time. And it was a good period for me. because I had learned so much. And at this point, I'd met so many people. Shell Oil Company came to me and wanted to hire me to help them launch a new technology that Shell Technology Ventures out of Houston had created to remediate all types of hydrocarbons and metals and other types of contamination on military installations, et cetera. So I'm thinking, all right, Shell Oil Company, now I'm going big time. And they made me an offer and I accepted it and went to work for Shell Technology Ventures. And after about 18 months, they realized after spending probably around $100 million that they could not be successful in the marketplace because they're Shell Oil Company and they're trying to compete in an environment where using electricity to remediate groundwater, you're boiling groundwater forever. So they recognized that they weren't going to be successful in this. So they folded up the technology, gave it to Texas A&M and closed up shop. And, that was the end of that chapter.
So a couple of things. One, a man comes around the corner of a restaurant booth and says, hey, I want to offer you a job. I mean, you've been to this point, right, successful in taking the chance, making yourself open to all these things and learning as you go. I mean, obviously school didn't train you for any of this. And then what?
I'm a very trusting person by nature, and that has bitten me a couple of times. So, you live and learn, you make some mistakes, you trust the wrong person. I always prided myself on judging character of people, and I felt like I had a pretty good radar on, who's a good person and who's not a good person. And fortunately, I surrounded myself by pretty good people and didn't make too many erroneous decisions in the people I associated with up until later in life.
But I think it's an incredible story so far. All right, so Shell folds, then what?
Shell unfolds. So during my time at Shell, I was really operating in the Western United States, like 7 states. And I was teamed up with a company called Earth Tech, who ultimately was acquired by AECOM, who's now a multi-billion-dollar, multinational, architectural engineering firm. So I teamed up with Earth Tech, and I'm traveling around the Western U.S. doing these dog and pony presentations to anybody and everybody who would listen to us who needed or required some type of remediation on their site. And with Shell attached to the company business card, you got a lot of people's attention. So I was doing this roadshow with a lady who eventually became my boss at Earth Tech. And once Shell closed down, she came to me and said, hey, you need to come work for Earth Tech. And, I've got bigger plans for you. And sold me into, her boss, the CEO of the company at the time. And they hired me as a commissioned salesperson, kind of sight unseen, although my mentor who brought me in knew that I was going to be successful because she was going to help me be successful. And after about the first year, I was making more money than the executive suite. So they made me a full-time offer and kind of brought me down to earth and said, hey, you can't be making more money than our executive leadership team. So I was with that company about 6 years, and it was probably the best company I've ever worked for and the best time and the best learning opportunity I've had throughout my career. And to this day, I regret leaving that company. But, I got recruited away because I was successful at what I was doing. And I got recruited by another global architectural engineering firm. And I went to work for that company, which was Arcadis. And I do regret leaving Earth Tech, though, because I look back at the people I worked with and the things I was learning and the flexibility I had and the decision process I had to go through to get to become successful.
So you were with them for 6 years, which is the longest you were with anybody up to this point.
Correct.
Now you go to Arcadis.
I went to Arcadis, and I had an excellent run there too. The big company, they had some patented technology that was a little different than the guy on the next corner, the next AE firm, and I was very successful in procuring a very significant, several $100 million contract to dismantle 8 power plants throughout Texas that were being acquired by a major utility. And I was very successful in getting that contract to ground, and we won that. And it became evident that the corporate world was kind of vicious, and, a lot of my colleagues were taking my credit. And it, rubbed me the wrong way. And I said some things in the C-suite that got me in trouble. And ultimately I said, to the CEO of the company, which was a big big company. And I was in that circle. He said, look, you can't talk down on your boss, because I told him, I said, either this guy goes or I go. Well, sure enough, 3 weeks later, I got my walking papers. And that was a life lesson for me, that you got to be self-aware of what you say in your environment and the company you keep and the company you work for. And it was a major eye-opener for me, and probably one of the bigger mistakes I've made in my career. So I got fired from that company, which was okay because it was a stepping stone, and it was a major growing pain and a major life lesson, and a very critical time in my life because I was married and I had kids at home to support, and it was a blow because I had never been fired from a job in my life. It really knocked the wind out of me, took the wind out of my sails.
But was it a mistake? I mean, if you had to do it again, you stood for something.
I would probably have done it differently, but I would have left the company. I think I would have left on my terms and not been so naive and kind of ignorant to what I was doing. And I was still somewhat young and cocky and thought that, hey, my big project's going to outweigh my boss's longevity with the company. And, it was definitely an eye-opener.
I also think, though, everybody should get fired at least once.
Totally agree. Yeah, it changes your perspective in who you are.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing necessarily. All right, so now you're fired.
Well, at this point, I'm like, okay, do I really want to do this for another company? What are my options? And I kind of looked around me. I'm like, all right, the remediation business, the environmental business. I've learned a tremendous amount working for these global architectural engineering firms. I was doing a lot of energy-related projects, and I was very interested in alternative and renewable energy. And I thought, I could probably make a go of this. And I had really good relationships with ports in the Western U.S. I had really good relationships with municipalities, utilities. And I'm thinking to myself, I think I should start another company and make a go of an energy, alternative renewable energy company doing energy efficiency projects. And I did. And I started a company called MuniFed Energy, Municipal Federal Energy. And I had a partner that I started that with who came out of, he was a developer in the real estate world, and he had some ideas. And so we formed MuniFed Energy and started down that path, and we became somewhat successful, not wildly successful, but, we were making money and paying the bills. And then ultimately I come to find out that, be careful who you marry in business, because he was not the person that I thought he was. And we agreed to disagree and part ways. And that was ugly. It was painful because we ended up suing each other, and nobody wins when you sue in a company. But ultimately I took over the company. He moved on. I brought in another partner, and we continue with that company for another 2 or 3 years. And then ultimately I merged that company with a company out of Long Beach. It was a very well-established mechanical, electrical, plumbing firm. And we transferred all of our contracts to that company, and they hired us as full-time employees. And I became the energy market sector leader. And that was a good 5-year run. And it really helped me kind of regroup and get back on my feet after a major blow of having bad character judgment of a business partner. And that really knocked me down a couple of steps. And, I began to wonder, I've had self-doubt. And ultimately I got over it, and I realized it wasn't me. It was somebody that interfered with my workspace and put me on a different path. And once again, I mentioned earlier, things happen for a reason. And definitely things happen for a reason. I got redirected, and I ultimately came out on a winning end. I was endeavoring on some other technology, which ultimately, when I left this firm, P2S Engineering, that we merged with, I created my last company, Aris Technologies, which was a kind of a brainchild that I've been working on for 15 years. And I secured funding to build this emissions capture technology for ships at berth that call California ports. And over, it was a 15-year startup, but the last 3 or 4 years was really the heavy lifting, where we got it financed, we got it built, ultimately got it, commercially operational. And I had all the major shipping lines were my customers. And last year, one of my major shipping line companies offered me an opportunity to buy the company, and I sold it. And that was my probably last and final entrepreneur endeavor.
So you've had not the typical get into a company and stay the run, right? You bounced all over. Any regrets?
I've had a very meandering journey through my career. Yes, I've got a couple of regrets. Would I do things differently? Maybe. Are my regrets so overwhelming that I, lose sleep over them? No. The regrets I have are just business decisions that I probably should have made differently. I think the paths that I took to get where I am today, they were all stepping stones. And I look back, every career move I made in my entire career was either an advance or at minimum lateral. And what I would suggest is don't ever take a lateral move. Always, when you make a move in your career, make sure you're taking an advanced move where you're bettering your career, you're bettering your payroll, you're bettering your family. So I look back and I think my journey, it was definitely meandering, but every stone I stepped on was a different, it was a successful stone getting me to a different plateau in my life.
Did you love what you were doing?
Most of the time. I love the fact that I learned so much from working in the corporate environment, and I worked, working with some great people and lots of mentors along the way that helped me become successful. Having my own company or companies has been incredibly fulfilling because you're putting yourself and your family and you're taking a lot of risks that you normally, most people don't ever have the opportunity to take those risks. And, lost a lot of sleep. My wife probably a lot of lost sleep as well. But, at the end of the day, it made us very, very strong. And it made me probably a much better person to go through the different exercises that I went through in my career.
And the role of mentors. You've had several along the way.
I have, and I've had some phenomenal mentors. I can't think of one mentor that I had that didn't really take me to another level, made me think in a different way, made me look at projects in a different way, made me think of economics in a different way. So yes, mentors, my advice to anybody in life, no matter what you're doing, whether you're an entrepreneur or a company person, find a mentor that can help you grow and be a mentor to help others grow when you do have that opportunity, because it's been very fulfilling for me to be mentored by some of the greatest people I'll ever know. And for me to be able to pay that back and mentor students today or younger folks, startups, to share my experiences and hopefully, one shred of wisdom to save them the grief that I've gone through in some areas where, I think that's what a good mentor can be. And don't make the same mistakes that I've made. These are ways to get around those mistakes and think about them.
So you have a son that just graduated college. Then you've shared how he was interning. Now he's working. I think one of the things a lot of graduates struggle with is, now what? How do I get a job? I just graduated. And how did you help him? What advice do you think if he was here, would he give others? What did he do?
Excellent point. I have 3 kids. All 3 graduated college, 27, 25, and 22. My oldest son, he got an internship last 2 years of college and ended up going to work for that company once he graduated. And that was his stepping stone into the real world. So I would highly recommend get an internship while you're in college. Get a job that might be directly related to what your major, whatever it is you want to do when you do graduate. And his career launched from there. You got to have a job to get a job. Always, it's much easier to find a new job when you have a job. So that would be one recommendation. My daughter, she became a nurse. So, she knew what she wanted to do and she did it, and she's successful in, her nursing career at 25. My youngest son, who just graduated from college about 4 months ago, very entrepreneurial. I think he watched his parents, all my kids watched their parents work very hard, and, they learned a lot just by watching what we did. They asked a lot of questions, and we mentored them as parents, would parent any child, try to give them good advice and send them down the right path. But my youngest son was very entrepreneurial from a young age, and he was a sneakerhead in high school and buying and selling high-end tennis shoes, and he did very well. And he turned that money over and made quite a bit of money, in cryptocurrency and NFTs and stuff that I have no idea how to invest in, but he did very well at it. And his last year of college before he graduated, he wanted an internship, and he was looking around and he saw a full-time position. And he called the CEO of the company 3 or 4 months before he graduated graduated, maybe it was 5 months, and said, can I come in and talk to you about this position? I'm a student and I'm not ready for a full-time position, but I'd really like to, interview with you and interview you. And the CEO, I think, was kind of pleasantly surprised to see some young man with this much, gumption to call and do that. He took the meeting. My son came out of there with an intern job. He sold himself to the CEO that, hey, I'm not graduated yet, but I want to learn, and I think I could come in from a supply chain perspective, which he got his degree in business with a supply chain minor. And he told the CEO, I think I can save you money, and I know ways that I can do it because I've done some research on your company. Well, he came out of there with an internship, and then he worked, I think it was 90 days. Had his 90-day review about 2 weeks before he was going to graduate. And the CEO asked him, what do you want to do when you graduate? He said, what do you mean? I'm coming to work here. So long story short, I think he really took a CEO back, and they went to the table and ended up hiring him. He's now a full-time employee with that company in his third month on the job. They sent him, he just got back from a 3-week trip to Cambodia and Vietnam at 22 years old. Who gets to go on a business trip at that age to learn, to be in a factory, to do QA, QC? So unique individual in the fact that he's entrepreneurial, but forward thinking, goes out and confidence in himself, confidence in his ability. And my son was extremely introverted in high school. And when he got to college, he flipped a switch and became an extrovert, which really, really, that was a dynamic change to see how he went from an introvert to an extrovert literally overnight.
He put himself out there. Most people wouldn't call the CEO.
He put himself out there. And that, I think that's advice I would give to anybody is, have confidence in yourself, take risk. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, get in front of people, because you're going to fail. You will fail.
Right. I mean, the worst that happens is they say no.
Excellent point.
It's not the Hunger Games. You don't die.
No, you don't. And every no is that much closer to a yes. As a young entrepreneur, I would get 100 no's before I would get that yes. Yeah. But once that yes came, it's going to come. You're not going to live in a world of no's. Today, they're harder to come by, but you got to ask the question. You got to get in front of people. You've got to be ready, willing, and able to put yourself out there.
All right. So my last question, knowing what you know now, after all that, if you could go back, what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
Keep your head on a swivel. Don't do stupid things. And what I mean by that is, be smart. Think about your actions before you react. Look around you and put some thought into something, whatever it is you're going to do before you just pull the trigger and do it. I think I was a little quick to make some decisions without thinking through them, which might have been a good idea at the time. And I did learn from those. But I think looking back at some of the mistakes I made early in my life, I was very hasty to get out in front of something that I should have put more time to. So I think the answer to that question is just think twice before you act.
Good advice. Thank you so much. I learned a ton today about your story. It was really nice to talk with you.
Well, I appreciate it, Monica, and I look forward to our next discussion.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to Path Found. If anything we talked about today connected with you or gave you a new perspective, we'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared the episode with someone you care about. You can also find us on Instagram at Path Found Podcast. To explore more stories, resources, and ways to get involved, visit KeystoneNetwork.org. This podcast is just one part of the journey. At Keystone Network, we're helping young people and anyone figuring it out as they go build meaningful futures one step at a time. A huge thank you to my podcast editor, David Strutt. You can find him on LinkedIn for helping bring these stories to life, and to Elizabeth Miner at Silvermine Creative for the beautiful artwork and web design. And if you're on your own path, navigating the unknown, making a pivot, or simply figuring it out as you go, just know you're not alone. The route may not be linear, but there's always a way forward. I'm Monica Argandonia, and I'll see you next time on Path Found.